Frank Lucas rises from being a quiet driver in Harlem to becoming the most powerful drug trafficker in New York. His operation grows while a determined police officer, Richie Roberts, begins to uncover the corruption protecting him. As their paths move closer, violence, betrayal, and systemic rot start to surface across the city. A group of criminals burns a man alive as he begs for mercy. It then cuts to the gang leader, Bumpy, handing out food to poor residents for Thanksgiving. In the crowd, his driver, Frank, watches him with a tense expression. Bumpy notices this and pulls Frank aside to talk.
It's gotten so big, you just can't find your way.
As they walk through the neighborhood, Bumpy talks about how the country's economy has changed and how hard it has become to operate. While inside a small store, he suddenly collapses from a heart attack. Frank tries to get help from the shop owner, but no one steps in. Bumpy dies there.
Forget it, Frank. There's no one in charge.
His funeral draws many crime bosses and influential figures. News coverage presents him as a protector of the community, but a criminal in the eyes of the authorities, noting that he had been a major figure in Harlem for decades. Inside the funeral space, most attendees treat the event as a chance to network rather than mourn. One guest, Tango, treats Frank dismissively and sends him to fetch a lighter, which Frank silently ignores.
Go get me a light while you're at it.
A man later approaches Frank to offer sympathy and pledges his loyalty if Frank ever decides to collect debts owed to his former boss, explaining that Bumpy had prepared for this situation.
He made me promise that if anything ever happened to him, that I should make sure that you want for nothing.
Elsewhere, Richie, a police officer who hopes to become a lawyer, works a drug investigation with his partner Jay. During the operation, Richie accidentally discovers a truck filled with $1 million in cash. Jay wants to keep the money, but Richie turns it into his superiors, causing suspicion and awkward reactions at the precinct.
Cops kill cops they can't trust.
Richie does not know that Detective Trupo, one of the senior officers, is secretly tied to major drug traffickers. Frank later learns about Trupo's corruption through an Italian drug dealer. He also confronts Tango, who refuses to cooperate, pointing out that with Bumpy gone, the old power structure is finished.
We don't own no real estate in Harlem right now. I'm the landlord and the lease is 20%.
Frank spends time thinking after hearing news about how many Americans are addicted to drugs, and he decides to enter the drug trade. He first reaches out to his cousin Nate in Thailand to form a partnership. Frank withdraws $400,000 from the bank and travels to Thailand to meet him.
Yeah, it's me. Me, Frank, your cousin, Negro.
At the same time, Richie's wife tells him she plans to leave the state with their son to live in Vegas with her sisters, and she wants a divorce. Richie disagrees, saying Vegas is not the right place to raise a kid. This adds pressure as Richie also struggles to study for his law exams. In Bangkok, Frank meets Nate, who serves in the army and helps arrange talks with local drug dealers. When Frank asks for a very large shipment, Nate explains that no single group can supply that amount and suggests using several sources. Frank refuses and demands access to the main supplier. They travel into the jungle to meet the top producer.
We going?
Okay, let's go.
We going?
Why not? Let's go.
The producer asks Frank if he has connections, but Frank says he does not. The producer thinks Frank is insane and doubts his ability to move 100 kilos of heroin into the United States. But he agrees after seeing Frank's determination. Production begins, and Nate is placed in charge of moving the drugs overseas. Back in New York, Richie faces another crisis when his partner Jay becomes involved with drugs and kills a local dealer. Richie stops a mob from attacking Jay by pretending the dealer is not dead and acting like they are taking him to the hospital. Richie soon discovers that Jay killed the dealer and stole his money. Jay asks Richie to help him cover it up, but Richie refuses to protect him by hiding the crime. Jay suddenly jumps out of the ambulance and runs away.
Stop!
Meanwhile, Frank successfully collects the shipment from the airport. A chemist confirms the heroin is completely pure.
5% pure. I mean, there's no adulterants, no alcohol, there's no dilutants.
Frank begins distributing it across New York while staying out of the spotlight. As use spreads, overdose deaths increase rapidly. Richie is notified about the rising number of deaths caused by overdoses. Drug abuse becomes a national priority, leading the government to create a special narcotics unit. Richie is quietly recruited to lead investigations into the growing drug network. Frank reaches out to his family and invites them to his house. Later, he tells them he bought a large house for his mother and has brought the family back together.
It's your house, mama.
Mine!
That's yours.
He pulls his brothers into the drug operation and publicly kills Tango as revenge. Around the same time, Richie forms a small task force to investigate blue magic, the drug being pushed by Frank. Through their investigation, they find that the drug is far stronger than anything already on the streets and much cheaper. Frank later attends a party where he becomes interested in Eva, a former Puerto Rican beauty queen. During the event, he notices one of his brothers wearing flashy, expensive clothes and privately scolds him, warning that drawing attention could raise police suspicion.
I told you that. All right? But you trying to be like Nicky Barnes and them?
Later that night, Frank formally meets Eva and introduces himself. She seems interested, and they walk to her table together. Elsewhere, Richie passes his bar exam while continuing to work with his team to uncover leads related to blue magic. Richie decides to follow a drug dealer by pretending to buy drugs from him. He follows the man all the way to New York, but when the man delivers the money to another shop, cops from that state come in and take the money from the dealers. Richie manages to talk to them and get the money back since it is money he borrowed from his boss for the operation. His boss warns him not to get involved in New York from now on.
I said I don't want to hear about you going into New York again. You do whatever you have to do.
Frank brings Eva home, shows her around his house, and introduces her to his mother, making their relationship more serious.
She's an angel come down from heaven.
Over the following months, Frank rapidly expands his operation, setting up distribution networks across North Carolina, Queens, New Jersey, Brooklyn, and other areas. The business earns him millions, and a deal with a wealthy businessman allows Frank to gain near total control of the drug trade.
They look at me like it's Christmas and I'm Santa Claus.
They look at us like we're the help.
Frank eventually proposes to Eva, and she gives him an expensive coat as a gift. To celebrate their engagement, they attend a high-profile boxing match filled with celebrities, politicians, and powerful figures. Richie is also at the event, and he notices how much attention Frank receives, which raises his suspicions. He takes pictures of Frank and immediately orders an investigation, but his team finds no background information on him, leaving them stuck and frustrated.
Who the f*** is this guy?
Frank later marries Eva. On their wedding day, their car is stopped by Captain Trupo, the head of the Special Narcotics Unit. Trupo demands weekly payments after recognizing that Frank wore a coat worth $50,000 to the boxing match. Frank agrees and drives off, forcing himself to comply so he does not ruin his special day.
You done?
Oh, yeah, I'm done.
After hearing about the attention, Frank rushes home and burns the expensive coat to avoid standing out. But the damage is already done. Richie has already gathered information on Frank, and his team tracks his every step, learning how he lives his day-to-day life. After watching him closely and comparing what they see to how Bumpy once operated, Richie's team suggests Frank has effectively replaced Bumpy. They begin digging into Frank's brothers, and the pressure starts to build. This leads them to uncover several drug storage locations and money collection sites tied to Frank's operation, giving them their first real points of leverage.
Not the typical day in the life of a dope man, Richie.
Frank sends a message to Captain Trupo by burning Trupo's car, warning him not to interfere or try to intimidate him again. Soon after, Frank enjoys Thanksgiving with his family, while his drug empire keeps expanding, even as more people die from overdoses and the streets grow more desperate. Frank gets into a fight with Nicky, a rival dealer, when he learns Nicky has been diluting and selling the blue magic under his name. Frank warns him to stop, making it clear that he will not tolerate anyone weakening the product and risking his reputation. Later, Frank and one of his brothers are stopped again by Captain Trupo while driving back from a meeting with a dealer. Trupo searches the vehicle and finds a bag of drugs in the car. Furious over the mistake and the exposure, Frank lashes out and attacks his brother for being careless. Richie secretly watches the scene from a distance while following them, recognizing the cracks forming inside Frank's circle. As Richie pushes further into the case, his closest friend warns him to back off, explaining that Frank is protected by powerful politicians and dangerous connections. Richie ignores the warning and becomes even more determined, deciding to focus entirely on Frank and build a case that cannot be buried. Soon after, Frank and his wife narrowly survive an assassination attempt.
You okay?
Yeah. Shit!
His brothers believe Nicky is responsible, convinced the rivalry has turned into open war, but Frank rejects the idea and refuses to act on assumptions. Eva begs Frank to move somewhere safer, but Frank refuses, insisting that this is his home and that he will not run from anyone. At the same time, news breaks that the United States plans to withdraw troops from Vietnam and Thailand. This threatens Frank's supply line, so he urgently contacts Nate and demands over 2,000 kilos of product to secure his position before the pipeline collapses. Nate tells him the request cannot be fulfilled at that scale, especially under the changing conditions. Frank immediately flies to Thailand to handle the situation himself, determined to force an answer and keep the operation alive. Midway through the story, it is worth noting that the film is based on real events, and the real Frank Lucas actually cooperated with authorities, which led to the conviction of dozens of corrupt officers. Another notable fact is that much of the heroin smuggling method shown in the movie, using military transport from Southeast Asia, was confirmed through court records and testimony from real investigations. Meanwhile, Richie witnesses one of Frank's cousins shoot a woman. The police threaten the cousin with prison for attempted murder.
Let me see your hands! Jimmy,
To avoid jail, the cousin agrees to cooperate by wearing a wire to gather evidence against Frank. In Thailand, Frank meets again with the drug producer to figure out a new smuggling method, since the previous system using military aircraft is no longer an option. While in Thailand, Frank contacts his brother to discuss an upcoming shipment. Without their knowledge, Richie and his team are listening through the wire worn by Jimmy. From the coded conversation, they figure out that the drugs are expected to arrive on a military aircraft. On the day the plane lands, Richie arrives with a warrant to search it. His team thoroughly inspects the aircraft but finds nothing at first. Just before giving up, Richie orders one of the coffins carrying fallen soldiers to be opened. Inside, they see only a soldier's body. A military officer interrupts and angrily confronts Richie, criticizing him for suggesting that the army could be linked to drug trafficking. When Richie explains that his information comes from a reliable source, the officer becomes even more upset, refusing to believe that someone like Frank could use military transport for smuggling.
No fucking nigger has ever accomplished what the American mafia hasn't in 100 years!
At the same time, Captain Trupo and his unit storm Frank's home looking for cash. They intimidate Frank's wife and mother before uncovering large sums of money hidden inside the doghouse. Meanwhile, Richie continues following the movement of the coffins. Frank later returns from Thailand and is informed that his house was searched by the special unit and his money was taken. Furious, Frank loads his gun and prepares to kill Captain Trupo, but his mother stops him and tells him he is not a killer, warning that his family will abandon him if he murders a cop.
For your family, that they'll leave you, because they will.
As the coffins are transported, Richie and his team discover that the drugs are concealed in a hidden compartment inside one of them. They follow the truck carrying the shipment until it reaches a storage location. Richie quickly secures a warrant and calls for backup. Once reinforcements arrive, the police raid the site, leading to a gunfight between officers and Frank's men. During the chaos, one of Frank's brothers tries to flee but is chased down and arrested by Richie. After the raid, police arrest Frank during a church service. His distribution locations are searched, and he is formally charged with large-scale drug trafficking. In court, prosecutors label him as a major threat to the city. After one hearing, Frank asks to speak privately with Richie and tries to persuade him to abandon the case, but Richie refuses to back down.
And that's the way it is. That's just the way it is, so what we got, Richie?
Realizing this, Frank offers a deal. He agrees to provide information on corrupt police officers and senior officials involved in the operation. In exchange, Richie promises to help make his time in prison easier. Frank follows through and gives up names, which leads to the arrest of many officers within the Drug Enforcement Unit. He continues cooperating and points investigators toward Captain Trupo, who had stolen money from Frank's property. Facing arrest, Trupo takes his own life. With the arrest complete, Richie acknowledges Frank's cooperation. Frank is sentenced to 70 years in prison, and more than $250 million in assets are seized. Most of the drug enforcement officers connected to the case are convicted, along with dozens of Frank's relatives. Frank's wife leaves him and returns to Puerto Rico. Richie resigns from the police force and later becomes Frank's attorney. Because of his assistance in exposing corruption, Frank's sentence is reduced to 15 years, and he is released in 1991. Richie waits outside the prison to meet him. As they walk through the city together, Frank observes how much the world has changed during his time behind bars.
Back in my day, there was so many niggas out here buying dope, could have made a Tarzan movie.
And with that, the story ends. Please like and subscribe to our channel for more of the best film recaps.